First of all, as Reza said, I'm Joana Mata Pereira. I'm Director of Learning Innovation at Católica Lisbon School of Business and Economics, where I coordinate the Learning Innovation Office that aims to support all our faculty or all of our professors on the development of pedagogical ways, pedagogical new ways of working in their classes on teaching. So we support them on the teaching side, so not on the content on the scientific side, but on the teaching side. And other than that, I'm also a mathematics professor. But with a huge background on education, because I hold a PhD on education. So I have this kind of bipolar feature of being both on the exact sciences and on the social sciences. But so this is mainly it for me. And now I would like to ask you to do a little something straight away so that we can begin to interact a bit. And okay, we're beginning to have some responses. Okay, I also see here non-academic staff. For non-academic staff, well, this session will be mainly focused on teaching. So I hope that you grasp something, but please be aware of that it will be mainly focused on teaching. Chemistry, so we do have I would say from the full scope of subjects, from the some more exact sciences to the social ones and a lot of other fields. So chemistry here also, and on the other hand, so also on pedagogy and the learning technologies. That's good. Okay, I just wanted to have like an idea of what the subjects that you teach. Thank you for those. So attending today's, so I just wanted to actually try to better understand what, actually to adapt a little bit my my presentation according to your field, because you have like a very broad field, so I will try to grasp a little bit of it all. We are going to focus on why active learning, and for this we're going to grasp what active learning is. So we're beginning to check what I mean when I talk about active learning, because active learning can mean like actually a lot of things. Why should we use active learning? And this is the main topic of the workshop, and also a little bit on how to enact active learning. And for that, I'm going to begin straight away with an activity, and I will ask you to tell me, well, actually, you're going to do some breakout rooms so that you can tell me what you consider as active learning. So for this, I would like you to ask you for one or two examples and one or two non-examples. So one or two examples that you think that is active learning in the classroom, and one or two that you think, okay, this is not active learning. All are very interesting examples. So thank you also for that. I just try to synthesize that in projects. So for everyone else, just assume this. So active learning is focused on the activity. Okay, so we do have active learning when we have our students doing some activity. And what is this activity? Well, this activity can be like a lot of things. Namely, it can be gathering information. So students can be gathering information, and there you would have activity. And gathering is not only putting the information together. It's actually figure out which information they should use. Okay, so I'm thinking about AI when I'm saying this. So it's not just getting there and ask AI for it. It's actually looking, for instance, even if they look to AI, to look for it and to figure out which parts of the information are actually relevant. Activity can be thinking, so it doesn't have to be physical activity. So the students don't have to be moving to be engaged in an activity. So it can be thinking, it can be problem solving, and it can be like a lot of other things. The main aspect here is that students, through activity, they should reflect on ideas or on using ideas. So this is the main concept behind it. So they should be doing some thinking, some reflection on the process that they are engaging in. And also not only doing this reflection on ideas and on using ideas, but also regularly assessing if they are understanding the concepts or the problems, or if they are developing their skills. So they should also grasp their ideas to have a deep understanding of concepts of problems, to develop their skills, and they should also regularly assess that understanding. So the activity should be structured from our side as professors in a way that would allow students to deepen their knowledge on the concept, but also to self-assess their knowledge on the concept. So to reflect also on the learning that they did. Okay, so overall, when I'm talking about active learning today, this is what I'm talking about. Okay, just as a generic feature. So mainly the interaction between the student and the activity, and the way the students reflect on ideas and use ideas, and how they use that to build concepts and understand the concepts. However, on the environment, the classroom environment, students do or should interact with activities so that they can engage on active learning, but there's a lot more running on the classroom, and this is the content itself. So obviously these activities should be related to the content that we have. It should also be enroll, or they should also be engaged with the materials that we present, and this, or the materials that we make available, or that we ask students to find or to search for. It should also be students should also be engaged in some pace of learning, some structures, so that they can do their learning. And with all these contents, we have this learning process. So the students should be engaged with all these features. And now I do have a question, which is like, okay, so we have the learning process around the student, and this is a main feature of active learning, which is it is student-centered. Okay, so active learning should be student-centered, so it should be on the way that students learn more than on the way that the professor teaches. Okay, so it's more focused on the way that students learn. And as we have this, so the students as the focus of the process, my question is, okay, so what about the instructor? So what about the professor? So some first ideas, please feel free to just open your mic and speak out. What's the role of the instructor here? So if we're saying that students should, so we should prepare, of course, as professors should prepare the activities and the contents and the material so that they can grasp it, and then students should learn from it. So what's the role of the professor if we do have this, like some student-centered learning? Any ideas?
I hear a lot that the professor is a facilitator, but I don't know what that really means. I don't know.
Okay, that's a
Maybe
good
it
question.
is some kind of mentor with a
Okay, some
professional
kind of mentor.
knowledge, and he receives some answers. Tips for the students answering the questions during the process, and giving examples from his or her experience.
Okay, maybe. Okay, any other ideas? So we have now facilitator, not knowing what it exactly means. Mentor. What else?
In the chat, there are some answers too.
Okay.
About the motivator, provoker.
Okay, provoker. Okay, I like that one, provoker.
Provider of clear guidance and instructions for active learning activities.
Okay, so grabbing from that you just said, yes, that's true that the professor should be a facilitator. I can add a little bit on what the facilitator what means to be a facilitator, what it can be being a facilitator. Being a mentor and thought provoker, it's also a very interesting way of seeing it. So overall, the idea of the facilitator is actually a lot of this that you just said, like it's being able to challenge our students to deepen their knowledge, being able to ask the right questions at the right time, being able to add additional information when that additional information is needed, not adding it when students can grasp it. So it has like a lot of features, but overall, what is most relevant is for the instructor to provide the opportunities for this learning process to happen. And so if you think about that, it's focusing, like, as I always say, so the first thing that you should have present in any lesson is the aim, the objective that you wish for your students to learn. So by the end of this lesson, what do I want my students to have learned? What do I want my students to have developed in terms of skills? So attending to the aims that you have for your lesson is thinking about, okay, how can I, as a professor, provide them the best opportunities to do that learning process? And that is by having some clear ideas, as you said, like about the instructions of what they should do, having a good activity that I can propose to my students to be engaged in, and then also and mainly to support them while doing so, while developing that learning, while reaching that learning goal. Okay, and this support can be either by guiding the students through content. Okay, it's also relevant. And by the beginning, when you said, some of you said that some non-examples is this traditional lecture in which they have to listen and to grasp the concepts by themselves and try to make notes and try to visualize what we are saying as professors. So the students also have this as an important feature, and that's totally true. So the fact that we engage our students in active learning does not mean that we cannot have even during the same class some moments in which we present information. Okay, if that's information that they don't have, we should present them the information. We should help them on having the information that they need to engage in deeper learning afterwards. So this support can be either presenting information to the students, can be guiding them through the activity that they are developing, asking them questions, and challenging them. So this thought provoker, so challenging them to go further on the state that they already have. Okay, so mainly Maria José, a facilitator, would go for creating these opportunities and supporting. So the supporting part it's a very relevant feature of it. And supporting, as I said, can be a lot of things. Doesn't have to be only asking questions, doesn't have to be only making the students learn by themselves. So it can be also presenting information when needed. Okay. Any questions, comments before I move forward? Okay, so if not, I'm going to just present some additional examples of active learning so that we can then engage in another activity. So some examples of active learning are, for instance, simulations, which you've presented, the role play that you've also presented. So actually, I have a lot here that you've already said as possible examples of active learning. We have active learning experiences. So when I say active learning experiences, they can be a lot of things, and I can now recall the projects that that Christina presented. So some experiences in which they engage actively in their learning. It can be open-ended problems, meaning that these are problems that don't have a single solution, that they can have like several solutions for the problems, or not have a solution beforehand. We can have critical and creative thinking. Okay, we can have self-paced learning, which means that students would go for the learning. So we have the learning structure, then they would go for the learning by themselves. We can have also, for instance, cooperative learning. And from this, actually, we didn't talk much at the beginning, which is the possibility of them to learn from one another. Okay, so there was a little bit of that in the interactions part, in the discourse, also the listening from other students and interacting with other students. But I would like to highlight a little bit further this part, because the possibility of learning from one another is actually a very powerful one in the ways that the students learn. First of all, because students in the same class would have some similar contexts, and so if one can grasp a concept, some others can benefit from it, in a sense that he would present the content to their colleagues in a way that they can better understand each other. So this is a good feature for cooperative learning, for group work, for instance. And the other one is that whereas there is this similarity between the students in the group, there is also a lot of diversity, and that diversity can also bring some different features to the learning of each other. So what I would like you to think of is that active learning, whereas we can have like questioning and answering from professor to student, it should also, and maybe mainly, and this is the challenge here, but maybe mainly being student to student interaction and not necessarily professor to student interaction, okay? So trying to have more student-to-student interaction will also be very relevant for their learning. Okay, so these are some examples. These are not the all examples that we have, but are some examples. So my question is, okay, so we do have these examples, we do have these possibilities, but we know that active learning, I would say that unfortunately, but it might not be just unfortunately, is still not the main way of teaching nowadays. So even if we have like a very traditional lesson, we might have some of the students doing some very active learning, thinking about connecting what the professor is saying with some other thing that was taught in another lesson, thinking about how that connects with something else, how reflecting on if the professor is saying this, why is this other matter matters. So just to grasp that, if we think about only the students being passive or active, we may lose these possibilities of students being engaged in active learning while they are totally passive in the classroom, and also having the other problem around, which is like if students are asking questions, then we are doing some active learning, which might also not be the case. It is a good reflection in this sense that we only learn when we are actively learning, but from what we see from the lesson, it's not always easy to grasp. It's just this. It's just that it is not always easy to grasp if we are engaging our students in some active learning or in learning itself, and so it has to be active. Okay, further, but thank you for that, because this is actually a good reflection on what passive learning might mean. So thank you for that comment. Any further ideas of Why active learning? Any further comments? Okay, so I'm going to something like way more simpler, I would say. So why active learning? Because active learning works. Okay? So it's just this, is active learning does work. Okay, does work in a sense that students do learn from these kind of activities that get them engaged in the learning and in interactions within the classroom. And now what I have to present you is actually a study from some colleagues from Harvard. And they did a study on students' perception of learning. So what they did is that they divided the groups in two different groups. So this study is a study from 2019. And this is on the students' self-reported perception of learning. Okay, so this is what students say that they learned. Okay, so we have two different sets. One set in active learning, following the best practice in the discipline, so in the subject. So in this particular case, this was an introductory physics course. So they divided the introductory physics course in active learning and passive learning. On active learning, it is on the best practices on physics, on introductory physics. And on passive learning, we have so these best practices. And on the passive learning, we have what they called a superstar lecturer. So one of those that all the students really like and that shares the content. You know what kind of professor I'm talking about, right? The ones that fill the room, and even though they are only speaking, we can actually be engaged in the learning. So what happened with this? So what happened was that in passive learning, students had actually a higher perception of learning. And this is because we do have this here superstar lecturer in the situation. But we do have this. So the students have a higher perception of learning here rather than in the active learning, in which they had a positive but lower perception of learning. So what the students reported was actually that on passive learning, they learn more and better. Okay, so this was what was reported by the students, that on passive learning they learn more and better rather than on active learning, in which the reaction was also positive but with the lower perception of learning. So they felt like they learned less on active learning. Okay, any comments on this? Is this what you would expect?
Yes. I mean, frequently this is what happens. If you engage students with active learning, and especially if you use certain activities, they feel like the professor doesn't really want to work, and this is just a game, and I don't get much out of it. We've had that experience here with some of the active learning strategies we've used at Católica. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Maria José also has like self-experience on this kind of situation in which the students just feel like, okay, the professor might. What I feel is that sometimes the students just feel like, okay, maybe the professor doesn't even know a lot about this. That's why they are asking us to learn by ourselves around it. So yes. Any other comments on this? Okay, so what happened was exactly this. So the students had a higher perception of learning in the passive learning, and positive but lower perception of learning in the active learning. However, what happened was that when they assessed the students' learning, the students on active learning learned more. So this is mainly, so I'm presenting this study mainly to share that even though we can listen to our students saying, oh, I would rather have someone teaching me in a lecture sense. this content, instead of doing these activities only for fun or for so some students would reach for different ways of saying this of sharing this perception, but so even though we might have our students doing so, saying that they would rather have passive learning than active learning, what the research shows us is actually that they do learn more from active learning than from passive learning. Okay. I have the reference there, and then by the end I will also share the presentation with you so that you can have these references also for sharing around your colleagues if you feel like there's the need for it. Okay, so this meaning that it is relevant to have active learning. So why active learning? Well, because it hires students' motivation. So it reaches for students to be more engaged in the classroom and so having more motivation around it. So to be more engaged in the learning, not only in the classroom, but also in the learning. And also to develop the ability to self-regulate learning. So to understand to what extent they are learning and to build from the exact position in which they already are. Okay? And with this said, what I mean with engaging with active learning and passive learning is actually not just having active learning, but finding the right balance between passive and active learning. Okay, so I wouldn't suggest changing fully to active learning straight away. I would suggest this, like some balance between some active learning activities and some passive learning activities. And also consider that active learning and passive learning don't work like this. Like, okay, so here we have like full active learning and here we have full passive learning. It is not the case. What we have is actually a continuum between active learning and passive learning. Okay, so what we have is that we would have activities that are more on the active learning side. We would do something on class that is more on the passive learning side. So what I would suggest is, if we think about the continuum being somewhere over here. Okay, so having some activities that go a little further than students learning only by seeing or listening to something. And as soon as we pass that line of students just learning by only seeing or listening, as soon as we pass that line, so as soon as we begin to interact with students by asking some questions, for instance, we are already moving towards the active learning path. Okay, so we can do some small active learning from the very beginning and just by beginning to interact a little bit more with our students. So we don't have to go straight for a simulation, or we don't have to go straight for a role play. Of course we can, but we can also do like some small steps towards moving to active learning. So that also for the students is not such a hard change, because actually most of our students still have passed through schooling from mainly lecturing, and that means that they are not used to do some active learning activities. So we can introduce those active learning activities to students also at a small pace, okay, instead of just jumping towards throwing them to very in-depth active learning. Okay, so it would be beneficial for us to do this change as a slow change instead of just changing it straight away. Okay. And now, as we are almost in mid-time of our workshop, I have an additional activity for you. And this one will require you to have somewhere to write down something Okay, so please just grab a paper and pen or something. Please be sure, make sure that you have a paper and pen with you. Okay. Do you have some paper and pen with you? Okay, now let me just make sure that I don't mess up this. Okay, so the first thing that I would like to ask you is to memorize the forms that will appear in the order that they appear. So first thing is just to memorize, okay? So you will see some forms, and I would like you not to write down the forms straight away, or either you will lose some of the forms. So just look at the screen, okay? Just look at the screen and try to memorize as many forms as possible and in the order in which they appear. Okay, can we do that? Can we try to do this? Can I move forward with the forms? Are you ready? So the difference, so my question now actually is, what was my aim with this exercise? Other than testing your memory, that is something that you don't test often.
Letting us understand that context is important. If you don't just have the pieces of information separate and you have them in a context, then it's easier to understand them, I think.
Yes. Yes, that's part of the deal. So if you have a context, it is, yeah, and there in the chat we have also associations. So if you have a context in something that you can link your knowledge to, so link what you're memorizing to, it makes it easier, for instance, for memorizing. And here we are just testing memorizing, right? It's not something deeper than this. But yes, that's exactly it. So what I am to show you with this, and I definitely have to do the first one harder to memorize, because it did manage to have a lot of the forms memorized. But yes, what I aim to do with this is exactly acknowledge the fact that when you have something to connect your knowledge to, the learning is deeper and more effective. Okay, let me just tell you that the way in which the figures appeared in the first time was also as a flower vase. So the places where they were also altogether made a flower vase. Did you manage to grasp it in the first place? Okay, but for me as a professor, it is like very easy to grasp that it is a vase with a flower, with two flowers, because I do have the knowledge behind it to grasp that it was a vase with two flowers. So when I see the forms in the first place, I see the vase and two flowers. So this is to tell you that we as professors see more than, or know more than what our students do. And sometimes we don't grasp that they cannot make those connections. Okay? And when we do active learning, by doing this, asking for feedback from students and trying to have them self-regulating their learning, what we are aiming for is exactly to do this, like to ensure that the connections that they make are grasping the same knowledge that we want them to achieve. Okay, so whenever you go to class next, so the next classes that you have, please remember the vase and flowers and think about, okay, what do I want them to learn? What's the context that they need to grasp that learning? And ask some questions, put on some questions for feedback. So ask for some feedback from students to understand if they grasped the learning that you aim them to grasp. So if they don't see only the forms, but also the vase with the flowers. Okay? Okay. So any comments, questions, or something around this topic? And also that's that, so context is relevant. Okay, so on finding the balance between passive and active learning, so I'm getting back to that. As I said, we have the students that learn only by seeing or listening to something. And what do you feel would be the next step? I've already talked a little bit about it, so hopefully you grasped it. So what's the exact next step for this passive learning towards the active learning? Okay, so for strategies, I'm just going to go for think, pair, share, so that you have that and the other one is this more for discussions. So the think, pair, share, I would go more for just regular questions, intentional, a little bit deeper questions than just asking what they just saw, but just for a small moment. And this is something that doesn't take a lot of time because it's just like they have 1 minute to think, 1 minute to share, and then we just so tops we would spend like 3 minutes on it, or maybe 5 if the answers go on a very good direction. But it's something that we can do like in a very small set of time. The 1, 2, 4 all is actually would go. Actually, I don't know it by that name. I cannot recall the name now. But it is something that it is known as snowball. I'm sorry. This one is known as snowball discussion. That one would be more useful for bigger discussions in which you can have like arguments and counter arguments, and so that they can get engaged in a real discussion. Either there are 2 of them or 4 of them, or just running the groups larger. Okay, so questioning is there on the limit, I would say. So it is already a little bit on the more active side of the scope, but it's still a little bit there on the limit. Then we have some other possibilities. Some active learning activity for part of the lesson. So not the whole lesson, but just part of the lesson. Okay, so in this part of the lesson, in this 30 minutes, in this 20 minutes, I will do something more focused on active learning, or students searching for something and grasping a concept, on students making some generalization of some example that was presented. So just small activities that could fit in a part of a lesson. And then we have the big active learning activities as simulations, role play, the active learning experiences, the open-ended problems, the cooperative learning, just to state some. Okay. So these are some examples, and what I would like you to think about is we will actually have some time to do so in a couple of minutes, but what I would like you to think about is, okay, what do I already do? What can I do further than what I already do? And in doing so, I would like you to bear in mind some relevant, I had some additional ones, some critical creative thinking, the self-paced learning, but I would like you to bear in mind some decisions that should be considered while you think about active learning, okay? And this would be that learning involves active construction of meaning, which means that they should build their knowledge from the knowledge that they already have as much as possible, okay? The other one is that learning facts and learning how to do something are 2 separate concepts. Okay, I had one example from medicine that's actually very good, because and now I don't know the term in English. I don't know if someone can help me when the doctor just something you. I don't know what's the term in English.
Auscultar? É auscultar em português?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
listens to your breathing or listens to
Okay,
your
so
heart.
listens to your breathing.
Yeah.
That's a good one. You say,
I don't know the exact word either.
Exactly. I also don't know the wording in English, and I'm sorry for that. But so when the doctor listens to your breathing, what I had is that in some medical schools, what happens is that the assessment of this is a theoretical assessment. So they know theoretically what they should do. So they are assessed on how to listen to the patient's breathing by answering a written test. So they would just either describe or do some multiple choices on what they should do and shouldn't do. And my question is, does that mean that they know how to do it? And we can easily, like any one of us, say that no, because one thing is knowing that you should like put your, and again, I don't know, stethoscope. I don't know if what's it called. So where you should put it, and another thing is actually to do it. So please bear in mind that learning facts and learning how to do it, to do something, or in other words, learning concepts and learning how to apply them, are two different things. So bear that in mind whenever you think about teaching. Another tip is that a student is likely to learn more when he or she learns with others rather than alone. Okay, and this is for the group work, the discussions between colleagues, the possibility of interacting with other students. So they would learn more in interaction than learning rather than by themselves. And the other one is that meaningful learning is facilitating by articulating explanation, whether to oneself, peers, or faculty. And this is something relevant because so meaningful learning is not only learning for themselves, but is learning enough so that they can explain to others. So when our students go from knowing something for themselves to being able to explain that to someone else, the learning is way more deeper than if they only know it like either by memory or to themselves. Okay, so that's why we should question them to grasp their learning, so that we can see if they can explain what they learned, if they can explain the concepts. Okay, and that's where we have meaningful learning. Okay, and now I'm going to have you again on breakout rooms to do something different now, which is to commit to take action. So what I would ask you to is to identify one activity that you can enact in the classroom, like any activity. It doesn't have to go bold again. So if you're not used to active learning, just go for some small activity, okay? But so think about one activity that you can enact in the classroom, and then commit with the group to share your experience. With the group that you were going to be in with the breakout room, okay? Just commit with them to share how did it go, okay? Just share some emails between you, and then just, if you feel like involving me also, please do. I will share my email by the end of the session. But so what I would like you to do is this: is like to now be back in some groups. I will just, so that the time that I would expect is to have you 15 minutes in to discuss and to just decide on some activity and commit to it. Can I ask you for that? Conversations went like interrupted, but that's the usual with breakout rooms. So I hope that you had some good discussions. Just to conclude our session, one is this citation, which I feel it's like very relevant when we think about teaching, and this is an author that says that as researchers, as scientists, as even as professors. So we would never think of writing a grant proposal, and we can think about here also on an article or anything, without a thorough knowledge of the relevant literature. Yet all too often, when we go in the classroom to teach, we assume that nothing more than our expert knowledge of the discipline, so the subject, and our accumulated experiences as students and teachers are required to be a competent teacher. This is to say that for us to be competent teachers, competent professors, we should know not only about our subject matter, but also a bit about pedagogy. So a little bit about how to teach. And we don't grasp that only from our experience in teaching. This means, so this is the same as, for instance, if you think about other professions as becoming a doctor without proper training, or becoming anything else, another profession, only by experience, okay? So we don't get our profession only by experience. We don't become teachers only by our experience as students. We don't become good teachers only by our experience in teaching. So try to, and I know that you are engaged in some of this because you are doing this workshop. So developing your teaching skills is also a relevant feature for being some good professors. And to end, I would just like you to recall that active learning and passive learning are not separate. So this is a continuum, and we can work all along this continuum, trying to focus a little bit more on this part. Remember that active learning works even if our students say that they learn better with passive learning. And on my side, this is 8. So thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for coming to this workshop. You have my email in there if you want to reach out to me for any reason, or even to share some of the experience, the new active learning experience that you do in your class. Please feel free. I will gladly listen to your experience and share mine if you're willing to. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming to this workshop.